Odyssey Opera is starting its second season on Saturday. The company is performing an opera by the Austrian composer Erich Wolfgang Korngold, also known in Hollywood for his Oscar-winning film scores. The opera is called Die Tote Stadt, or The Dead City. We'd like to welcome one of the soloists, mezzo-soprano Erich Brookhyser. Thank you very much for being with us, Erich.
Thank you for having me.
First of all, talk about this opera, because a lot of people said, an opera called The Dead City? Who is this?
Well, I think it takes place in Bruges, in Belgium, and the main character, Paul, has lost his wife several years ago and has been mourning her death for years, maybe decades, maybe a decade. And he's constructed his entire life around this dead wife of his. And then he happens to see a woman who has the likeness of his dead wife, Marie, a woman named Marietta, who's a dancer. And the story ensues that by the end of the show, he has killed this dancer and says, "Now you're just like my wife. She's, dead, just like my wife." We find out, though, that that's a dream. And he realizes, after having dreamt that he has to put his mourning to rest and move on with his life.
Well, I know that there is one number, Marietta's song, that a lot of famous soloists have recorded. But describe the music, because this is a composer from Austria with a Hollywood connection. Sounds maybe like a hybrid of that, maybe.
Yeah, people called him the Viennese Puccini. And I think that's a really good way of describing it. It's lush, romantic music, but with the kind of harmonic language of what came later, well, the Berg and Schoenberg and that influence, Wagner influence as well, from the German school, from the Viennese school.
And we're going to bring up an excerpt of some of the trailer for the upcoming performance.
Die Tote Stadt is an opera that almost everybody I know knows about, but very few people have heard it, and even fewer have seen it. It's an opera quite famous because Korngold achieved a certain fame later on as a Hollywood film composer. After, or before the Second World War, actually just before the Anschluss, Korngold and his family fled Austria and relocated in Southern California. And he became the most famous film composer in the world. In fact, he was one of the few composers who's ever achieved top billing, along with the stars, it would say Betty Davis, Errol Flynn, and Erich Korngold.
One of the things that we picked up in the trailer is about the orchestra. Now, this is a new opera company, but the orchestra has a history before it 1 year ago.
Right. Well, it used to be Opera Boston, and this new orchestra, the Odyssey Opera, I think sprang out of that. It's wonderful players, all from the Boston area, I think, and they're a young group. They don't look like the Boston Symphony. They look like 20 and 30-year-olds who are eager to play anything that's put in front of them, as far as I can tell, and they're magnificent.
And you've got Gil Rose in charge of them, too.
Yeah, yeah.
What about your role in this upcoming production?
My role is the maid of Paul, the main character, and she's been with Paul since the beginning. So she knew the dead wife, and she knows Paul also through all of his grief, and she's kind of a through thread, I think, for him to understand what's reality and what's not.
So what about your attraction to this particular ensemble? Because I know you studied in Boston, but you come back to the States, and well, there are other places, so why'd you come here?
Well, Boston, I think, is a great city for the arts, and it always has been for centuries. So I was working in Germany, and I love European cities, but when I came back, Boston is probably the closest to a European city that I know of in the U.S.
Well, talk about the upcoming performance, because for one thing, this is going to be maybe not a fully staged opera, or will it be fully staged?
No, it is not fully staged. It's taking place in Jordan Hall at New England Conservatory, and it's a concert version. But the music is so glorious, I think people can use their imaginations and come up with probably an even more extravagant set and more extravagant costumes than what anyone could actually afford on a
oh yeah, no, we have some great concert opera by Boston Symphony right across the street too. So that's nothing that's unusual. And the sound in there, what about that?
The very best, probably one of the best halls in the world, I think.
Right. Talk about some of your own career, because how the mission of this company fits what you've been doing. How do you see that?
Yeah, well, I think opera in Europe at least has a very long, strong tradition, and I think opera in America is still trying to find footing, or maybe had footing and then loses it because of financial crises and various things. But Odyssey Opera is into taking works that people haven't been doing because they've fallen out of fashion. In the case of Korngold, his music was banned during the Nazi regime, and then he fell out of,
He wasn't avant-garde enough for the 20th century.
That's part of it.
Yeah.
And just Jewish voices, Jewish composers in general weren't heard as often or during the war and afterwards. Their music was burned. So I think it's great that Gil Rose has created an ensemble that resurrects pieces that really ought to get some playing time, but just don't because of various ways that music history has written them out.
Right. Well, we're going to talk about one of your performances, and we're going to bring up an excerpt right here in just a moment. Talk about the power of opera to characterize.
I can think of no other art form that expresses human emotion more accurately or more passionately. When you have music and staging and real people creating sound and an entire soundtrack of a 90-piece orchestra underneath you, you're better than film, as far as I can tell and imagine.
What about roles that you've sung? Anything that you're especially attached to that you enjoyed?
I've really enjoyed playing Carmen because she's just a lot of fun and gets to die at the end. That's always a fun thing.
Operas are hazardous for women.
Yes, they are. Well, hazardous for both genders, actually. But that's part of the drama. And you have music that carries you to those zeniths, then you kind of have to deliver in the dramatic storyline as well.
Well, one thing we should make sure we add here is this is a performance of Die Tote Stadt, and it's coming up on Saturday at what time at Jordan Hall?
7:30 p.m.
And of course, you've got the website for Odyssey Opera. That's pretty easy to Google.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you very much for being with us.
Thank you.
Erich Brookhyser from Odyssey Opera.